So thanks everyone again. Shawatanehi gunashish ahyakawasa ahich gunatin Gooch Glen. Thanks everyone. I was named Gooch Glen, which means the big wolf in Tlingit, by my great-grandmother Gunatin, who is 100% Tlingit and one of the leaders of the tribe. She grew up in a small village in southeast Alaska called Kake, K-A-K-E, Kake, Alaska. And so the Tlingit Indians are from the northwest coast, just right up north of Seattle and Vancouver in the Tongass National Rainforest, the largest national forest in the U.S., as well as the largest temperate rainforest in the world. So if you've ever been there, it's extraordinarily dense, very green, and it rains a lot. I was just listening to my brother, and his wife was saying, we had 10 sunny days this summer. The Tlingits survived in a very harsh environment, the Tongass National Rainforest. They call it the Inside Passage. And the Tlingits are known for totem poles, our symmetrical art. So as you can see on the back of my vest, this is actually an infusion of a killer whale and a bald eagle. So I've got a bald eagle here and a killer whale. And this is a wolf pendant that was given to me by my mother, which was carved apparently in the early 1900s. And so the Tlingits were essentially divided into two major moieties or clans, the eagle and the raven. And within those two moieties, there were multiple different clans, like the killer whale clan. I'm part of the killer whale clan. You've got the dog salmon clan, you name it. It's a lot of different clans. But the key was you had to marry someone from the separate moiety. So me being an eagle, I couldn't marry an eagle. I would have to marry a raven. And so hence my wife is a raven. So growing up in Southeast, I remember when in Juneau, Alaska. Juneau was a pretty small town. In Alaska, it's the third, maybe second largest city in Alaska, 30,000 people. And I remember when I was growing up, we had this stream in our backyard that every summer it was teeming with salmon. And you would see kids and people picking up salmon and throwing them, and it was absolutely crazy. But then they were spawning, obviously. And eventually the salmon stopped running in the stream because of the pollution. The pollution that the sewers were dumping into these streams, and you could just see it. One year they were gone. The salmon disappeared. In kindergarten, I remember going down to this place called Auk Lake. And in Auk Lake at the time, herring used to run by the millions in Auk Lake. And you would have sea lions by the thousands chasing the herring. And my kindergarten teacher would bring me down there, and we would have a one-on-one discussion. I don't really remember what we were talking about, but I remember the sea lions just gawking really loud. It was just a phenomenal sight. The amazing thing about Southeast Alaska or the Pacific Northwest is it's teeming with wildlife. So you've got bald eagles flying the size of a human being, just absolutely majestic animals. And you also have ravens the size of turkeys that are just really phenomenal. And then, of course, the sea life, killer whales, salmon, 5 different species of salmon up in Alaska. Really a phenomenal place. The Tlingit Indians, as I mentioned, were known for our symmetrical art, our totem poles. And the way we got through our harsh winters, we harvested salmon by the thousands, and we smoked them. So it was in a smokehouse, probably maybe a quarter of the size of this room. And we would smoke this salmon. It was the best salmon you've ever tasted. So good. And the Tlingits would eat the salmon 2 or 3 times a day like it was bread. And as we all now know, salmon's one of the best things you can put in your body. It's just and when you eat this, you can feel the nourishment. It's great for your brain, great for your heart, just phenomenal stuff. The Tlingits also harvested a lot of blueberries, probably the size of maybe a small grape. And that's where we got a lot of our antioxidants and vitamin C. We had a lot of wildlife that we harvested, bear, deer, you name it, and of course a lot of sea life. I remember when I used to visit my great-grandparents in Cake, the Tlingits were known for potlatches. And so in Tlingit society, in order for you to be wealthy, it wasn't based upon how much you had. It was how much you shared. So if you didn't share with everybody else, you weren't considered wealthy. And so we would go, I remember going to Cake, and I was just a little guy, and we would have these potlatches. And I remember looking at the food, and we would have seaweed, salmon, halibut, octopus, bear, deer, just amazing stuff. I tried bear when I was a little kid, and it was probably the grossest thing I've ever had in my life. Extremely tough and very gamey. I'd actually love to try it again, but just amazing. But, the amazing thing is I would see my great-grandfather, and he would be in this walker, and he would just be walking around and kind of waving to everybody, and they would say, that's your great-grandfather. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever, and I'd run outside with my brother, and we'd chase each other around. And then my great-grandmother, Gunatine, who named me, she would be in this wheelchair, and just a frightening old lady. And she was really strong, and she'd grab me by the arm, and she'd go, Gooch Glenn, and I'm like, ah. My brother would be laughing in the corner, and she pulled me back into her room one time. And she opened up her drawer. And in this drawer, I'm looking down at it, and she had all this candy, and I'm like, oh, this is great. And the wrappers on the candy were different. I'm like, the wrappers don't look like normal wrappers. Well, she was accumulating this candy over decades. And I started eating this candy. It was extraordinarily stale. So I had a couple pieces. I'm like, I think I'm going to go back here and maybe have some more bear or something. But the Tlingits were very harmonious. We lived harmoniously with the land, much like the lower 48 Native Americans. Everything had a spirit. From a blueberry bush to salmon to the eagles, the ravens to mountains. And the Tlingits revered rocks and mountains because they were permanent. And so it just, phenomenal appreciation for everything that was around them. My great-grandfather died in 1980. Essentially 5 or 6 years probably after I met him. And he was purportedly 117 years old. Lived off the land. And I like to tell people I've eaten one too many hot dogs, so I'm probably going to live to maybe 75, 80. And my great-grandmother died in 1985, and she was 110. And so for me, and I think for a lot of Native Americans, the culture and the knowledge that we had, and that we still have, a lot of that has been lost, but a lot of that we can still understand and infuse into our life. And for me, now I'm trying to slowly change my diet and to live like them, but also to live very harmoniously. An elder, a Tlingit elder, we were at an airport in Juneau a couple years ago, and he pulled me aside. And he goes, John, your great-grandparents were really phenomenal people, excellent business people. And Cake, small village, 500-600 people. But he said, your great-grandmother, she was so smart and so in tune with everything around her. She tied a coffee can to a tree and trained a raven to go around the village, pick up coins, and drop it into this coffee can. There are a couple ravens around my house, and I'm like gawking to them, like, come here, I'm trying to get that connection with them. Just phenomenal. But they look at you, and for me, there's that spiritual connection that I would love to have with a raven. Another key thing about the Tlingits is your name. And at some point, you're supposed to find or encounter your spirit in the woods. So back in the old days, they would shoo you off into the deep woods. And for me, being Gooch Glen, I would have to have some sort of encounter with a wolf and bring something back to prove that now I'm one with the wolf. I'm harmonious with the wolf. And there was a really interesting situation. Our zoo that we have over here. Last year we went to the zoo, and the wolves are really hard to see. They're kind of hiding back there, and sometimes they come down, and that glass mirror is kind of a one-way mirror. And so I was there with my kids, and a wolf came down, and I was right in front of the mirror, and he stopped right in front of me, and he growled at me. And I'm like, whoa, just amazing that somehow we had that connection. And I'm a big believer that there are those connections. So the Tlingit culture for me is just, there's so much knowledge that we haven't really tapped into. And that's one of the things that drives me with One Nation Walking Together. Getting involved with even the lower 48 Native Americans and how much they knew that has been kind of lost throughout generations. There was a story, apparently, that the mountain Utes used to, they were one of the first people to create light. And they would gather these quartz and put them on a rattle and shake the rattle, and it would create light. The light would emanate through the rattle, through electroluminescence. And so that knowledge that a lot of the Native Americans had is just so inspiring. And that's what drives me in terms of trying to help them rediscover who they are and be proud of their heritage and understand that, you had a lot to offer. Your people were very, very smart. You lived a long time. And there is reason to have hope. A few years ago, I launched an office in Cake, Alaska, at my prior company. And Cake, much like the lower 48 Native Americans, suffered from very high unemployment, roughly 80%, very high alcoholism. And a lot of people, the economy was dying. And I remember my cousin, I called them up and I go, hey, what do you guys need in the village? And he goes, hey, John, we need jobs. There's just nothing for us to do. We need something to do. And as many of you may know, psychologically, having a job has a big impact on a person. And so I made it a point, okay, I'm going to launch an office in this village. And my work history, I worked in Silicon Valley for 20 years, so I knew I worked at Oracle. We had people networked all over the place. So I launched an office in this village. We shipped up cubes from LA, office cubes. It took about 3 months, just amazingly long. And we brought in high-speed internet, the only place in town with web conferencing. And we launched 5 jobs. And the amazing thing was we had 20 people apply for these 5 jobs. And so we interviewed these people. Some of these people were related to me. But the interesting thing was they all said the same thing. They said, John, I'm not sure why you came here or what your company does, but our village is dying. People are leaving the village. And when we heard that you were coming to our village, and they said this verbatim at the end of every interview, they said, thanks for bringing us hope. I don't care if I get the job, but thank you for bringing hope to the village. And for a village of 500 to 600 people, 5 jobs is analogous to hiring several thousand here in the Springs. So a phenomenal economic lift pump for that village. So it looks like I'm running out of time. But for me, that's my passion, giving hope to people that don't have hope. The Native Americans have so much that they've lost. Rediscover who they are. We're in partnerships with other organizations, with the Utes specifically, to help them rediscover their culture, be proud of who they are, and also to provide jobs. One of the key things about One Nation is, yeah, we give them goods and services, but we also want to longer term provide them opportunities, to give them that hope, give them that job, and then also give them the time to understand who they are and to build upon that. Native Americans have always been a very proud people, and that is my drive going forward, is let's bring that back out. So thanks again, Gunash Chish. Thank you, everybody.